All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Elsa Afework. I'll be today's host for BlackMentalHealthMatters.org. Today's podcast will be talking about why Black men face greater mental health challenges today. And I have two very special guests, Roy Compton from the UK, and I have Sean Landrum from Indiana, United States. So welcome to the show, guys. And I would like to first introduce you quickly before you tell us a little about yourselves. Roy, you have a double degree in brain science, a BSc in human neuroscience, and an MSc in clinical neuroscience, it just sounds amazing in and of itself. Sean, you are an award-winning screenplay writer of many genres, from comedy, anime, you name it. I think you've won over 52 awards within the past 3 years alone. So it really, really is amazing to have both of you. So welcome to Black Mental Health Matters, discussing men and mental health challenges. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourselves. Roy, I'll start with you since you're first on my screen. If you can tell us where you're from, where you're located, and what you do, and why you do what you do.
Sure. So where I'm from, thanks for introducing me. I'm from the UK, from London. And then my background is, like we said, neuroscience. And what I do, so right now I'm training as a psychological wellbeing practitioner. And that's basically a kind of a low-intensity CBT therapist. It's with the NHS. So there's a lot of room within that role to really look into discrimination and how that's perceived psychologically, and how Black clients are at risk of specific mental health problems. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's a bit where I'm at the moment.
That's amazing. I know a little bit about CBT therapy, so to see that from the neuroscience perspective it's pretty cool. So welcome. And Sean, tell us a little about yourself, what you do, where you're located, where you're from, and why you do what you do.
Yeah. So I'm actually in a city called Westfield, Indiana. It's right outside of Indianapolis. I'm a screenplay writer. I also compose music for film. I've been doing that for 5 years now. Let's see, I cover, like I said, everything from anime to I'm doing a serial killer style thriller right now. So it's fun, man. I love creating worlds, different scenarios, opening people's eyes to different things that they may not be accustomed to seeing. It's just it's been a very good way to express what's going on inside and feel like you're making that difference, even if somebody's seeing it 100 years from now. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah. Probably a little longer than you want it, but sorry.
No, it's awesome. I think thinking outside the box, it has its various benefits and of course challenges as well. And I think it's really great that you continue to do it even after 5 years, and you have all these amazing code lists to kind of back up your work. So it's really amazing. So welcome to both of you. And so today, I guess with the topic of mental health, especially Black men mental health, I think it's very close to my heart, just because I have a lot of male figures in my life, from many uncles and brothers, and a lot of male close friends as well. And I think studies are showing, especially lately, that 1 in 10 Black men, they're living with depression, but a lot more, and experts are disagreeing, saying that a lot more are actually suffering in silence. And hopefully we'll be able to uncover some of these challenges and some of the reasons why that's happening. And it's interesting, like I said, I come from a lot of male-figured, male-dominant family, and it's often interesting to see the intricacies between how women express themselves versus how men express themselves. Women, we express even how the weather makes us feel, how the t-shirt makes us feel. It's all about feelings hour 24/7. Whereas when I see the conversations that take place even amongst men and women, it's very different. It's almost stagnant in a way. It's a bit black and white, and I think a lot has to do with the form of expression that men are taught, or it could be the form of expression men are forced to comply with within society. So hopefully we'll be able to break into those norms, because we're talking about why these challenges are happening today. And we're also seeing an interesting increasing trend where men are deeply affected by mental health struggles these days. And in the US, men are 4 times more likely than women to commit suicide. And of those who didn't seek treatment, they are predominantly Black men. So, and this is just the US alone. So, and we are seeing an increased struggle of mental health among Black men, even in studies. So we'll be uncovering or hope to understand these catalysts. What are the varying catalysts that, is it about access, or is it about, expression, or is it about lack of access? So we'll be able to break into that, and that will be that are contributing to, I guess, the negative effects of Black men and their mental health. So, I guess with that said, if we look at the topic in and of itself, why Black men face greater mental health challenges today, I mean, we're talking about a specific time frame today. So, we would like to know why today, what was the mental health like before, maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So it also gives us a little bit of a historical perspective. And are Black men facing challenges with respect to, could it be, like I said, access to mental health services, or speaking about mental health struggles, or are we talking about, the issues of the concept of mental health, mental health itself? So hopefully we'll be able to uncover some of those with you two. And I guess the first question would be, let's talk about the role of masculinity. Like I discussed, women express differently than men do, and I think a role of masculinity and femininity plays a bigger role or a bigger role than we think, or we realize when it comes to discussing anything. It doesn't even have to be mental health. So, if we talk about the role of mental health, because I think it is crucial in, deconstructing and giving an understanding of roles and responsibility among Black men. So my first question, it's to both of you. I guess Roy can go first. You're first on my screen. So how has the Black masculinity and Black masculinity norms affect the mental health of Black men?
It's a fantastic question. And there's so many different ways to go about it and look into it in the historical context, in the idea of Black masculinity kind of painting Black men as almost like a Black monster, as in these kind of characters who are hyper aggressive. They're not safe to be around, all of that. But one study that I looked at that was really interesting asked the question of what is health for Black men? What does health look like? And the study found that Black men, African American men specifically, defined health using the characteristics that men embody and the behaviors men engage in, and that their goals and values of men had to, how health was explained using those goals. So what that kind of showed was that there is a massive overlap between health and masculinity. That if you ask like an African American man, according to this study, what is health, their idea will be associated with their idea of what is masculinity and what is a good man, which is really, really, really interesting. So something as well, moving on from that, is that it's said that to improve mental health access and engagement in Black men, it may be useful then to speak about mental health within that masculine context, and to speak about mental health, taking care of yourself can achieve a family goal, a community goal. You can be a breadwinner if you take care of your mental health. So that was one thing they found with Black masculinity and mental health, is that the two are really intertwined.
That's very interesting. Sean, what is your take on this?
Well, I mean, here, like I said, here in the States, it's the same shit, different day, if you don't mind my expression. But I mean, all I can do is speak on my experiences and what I've went through, and to explain a little bit about my stance on Black mental health. I gotta take you on a quick little ride. Just give you a little bit about myself. I've worked since I was 9 years old. Right, I was cutting lines for a legit tax-paying company. When I was 13, illegally worked for a grocery store as a bagger, taking the bags out to the people's cars. Fast forward, age 18, I'm purchasing my first house. I'm making 45 grand a year. Next year, I'm purchasing my second house. After that, moved to Florida with the company, in hopes to one day dominate the world. But, all that, you get to like around 2008, I got my 401k. Everything is strong. I'm deep in Rich Dad Poor Dad series. Like I'm in tune with what I need to do. And then when that market crash happened, I lost everything. I mean, like not just a little bit, everything. Right. So on top of that, I lost my job. You know what I mean? So right now I'm sitting there with 2 kids, wife. So I started a janitorial company because, like I said, I'm a grinder. Um, I also worked a full 9 to 5. So I'd literally go. I had a janitorial company, so I'd literally go out in the mornings. I attached a printer to the back of my vehicle in the trunk. I would go to a business that said no soliciting and walk right on in, offer them a free estimate on cleaning. You can always find something that someone's not doing well, and exploit that and show them what you can do and do it better. If they were on the fence or they said, yeah, let's start 2 weeks, month, like let's start right now. I'd go out to the car, I'd print off the documents right there in the car. This was before wireless and everybody still needed faxes and all that stuff. So I go in there with the contract, boom, I start that night, go to my 9 to 5, get out from that, work till the day break. Like I said, I was determined to make it. I ended up with 12 employees, grinding, coaching my kids' basketball team. It was a full out effort to live the best life I could and provide the best life I could for my children, my wife. You know what I mean? I still want to buy my mother that house. Just all that stuff, right? So fast forward. I'm getting to the point where I'm becoming a branch manager for a personal loan company. I'm about to have my own branch. I got 12 employees. I got a basketball training thing going on. So everything's just coming together. And my heart started going into AFib. So atrial fibrillation is when the heart beats out of rhythm. And the first time that happened, well, it happened in the past, but not like it happened this time. I was coaching my daughter's championship basketball team. They had an undefeated season. I'm coaching daughter's lead scorer after, she put in some intense training. Like I said, life is good. We breezed through the first round of the tournament. Second round, heart goes into AFib. And I'm literally giving the job to my assistant coach, who's another dad, and I keep getting calls from parents. Hey, blah, blah, blah. We're down by 5, we're down by 15, we're down by 20. I'm like, oh my God, like there's no way this should be happening. So I said, forget it. Before I went to the hospital, I went to the game. You know what I mean? And they went on like a 26-8 run, and they only ended up losing by 4 points. But after that, I went to the hospital and had surgery. I'm saying this to say what type of mentality I had. So when this AFib thing started affecting me in so many different ways, like I had to let go of my full-time job. I had to let go of my janitorial company. You know what I mean? I at the time, I felt like I was about 80 pounds overweight. So my doctor said that may be a cause of it. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I left the job. I started basketball training full time, dropped 80 pounds, like thinking everything's good. Now AFib kicked my ass again, right? So excuse my language, by the way. I'm just being real right now.
Okay.
But so having to go from going 100% to sitting down and doing nothing was a huge adjustment. On top of that, the financial end of things. I had to eat into my rebuilt 401k and all that other stuff just to survive. And in that time, thankfully, a good brother of mine had mentioned he's passed away now, Damon McLeod. But, he had mentioned my storytelling capabilities with sales, things like that. So that's when I decided to go ahead and write a script, right? And lo and behold, I lucked into a 3 structured deal. And a week after I finished it, I sold it, right? So like this AFib thing tore down my entire world. Mm-hmm. And the mental struggle it took to get back to where I'm at today, I think is an testament to how strong Black men are in this world. Mm-hmm. And I'm just me in one situation. There's people that's, dealing with way more than that, but we haven't had a chance to talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. So this is new, and I think it's beautiful. It's a little more than what you wanted, so I apologize.
No, it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to uncover from what you said, and I think even starting off with, and it really goes in attest to what Roy said at the beginning. He was talking about how health to the Black man is equated with masculinity and masculine roles, and you just literally define that from your experience. And I think that is very stoic in and of itself, especially when he talked about how you started screenwriting, and that was a form of therapy, but you wrote because you wanted to make a living, not because it was therapeutic to you. So, it's like talking about mental health is a privilege to Black men because it's not something that is easily accessible that we're discussing now because we have this space to do so, but we're creating the space for ourselves, especially men are creating for ourselves. And it really is interesting, especially when he talked about the Black monster, Roy, and how, Sean couldn't even afford the privileges and the accesses that we'll be talking about later because it hasn't been open to, people of color, let alone Black men. And I think that's why, like I said, it's a topic that's really close to my heart because Black men don't have this affordability because they've been, it could be through masculine norms or gender norms to be able to be forced into the workforce. I mean, starting work at 8, that is just, I don't even know what I did when I was 8, let alone. It's just, I was probably
like I said, I was a big movie buff back then, so I saw the type of neighborhood I wanted to live in and raise my kids. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of my mother's friends. I haven't probably talked to her in about 20 years. As a matter of fact, I'd only seen her when I was a kid. But she had always told me, I had this aura around me, and not veering away, but again, a lot of stuff that happens throughout a person's life kind of molds them. But I've also had great experiences with movies, right? So it's a big balance, and it's about where I'm at on that.
Sean, what you were mentioning really highlights like how it goes without saying that masculinity uses work as the price tag for a man's value. And that's always risky because your ability to work can suddenly change. A physical injury can come out like that, And the thing for Black men in particular that is so sad is that Black men have some of the worst mental health outcomes after physical injury. So a lot of Black men struggle to return to work because of that particular sphere of being Black in the systematic places Black people are put into. The way that interacts with masculine values and where we get our value from makes it that Black men have some really bad odds of returning to work after injury. And that could be because Black men are systematically put into jobs that don't accommodate for changes in physical shift work. For example, they're not going to really wait for you if you're ill.
Right.
And or kind of poorer pre-injury health, and racism as just a compounding variable, like you're more likely to get bad care in the healthcare system as a Black man, or you're more likely to have been more severely injured because of the types of things you find yourself in. Right. Or like the last thing to add as well is that quite often what happens with Black men is if they hurt themselves in a certain area, they can't afford to remove themselves from that neighborhood or from that space or from that job. So they're exposing themselves to PTSD. And you can't return to work because of that, and you fall yourself in a depression loop. That one study found that over half of all Black men who have left work for a physical injury have depression or PTSD.
Right.
And it's really, I think what your lived experience, what you were mentioning, really shows the like systematic hurdles that Black men, Black masculinity presents. It's really, but really, that was a fantastic story, by the way, man. It was really inspiring.
It really opened my eyes, especially, I mean, the fact that you had to work that early because I think you both highlighted something that's very crucial that I didn't even understand before, is affordability. Not having to afford to take care of your physical being, let alone the mental health challenges that come with it after your injuries, after your surgeries. It really goes on to show how that is deeply embedded, not only in systemic racism or what is expected of the man, let alone the Black man. I think it also has to do with you almost have to compound yourself to be mentally resilient. Like you said, Black men are strong, not because they are or they're born with it. It's because they have to be, because you need to survive. So you have to be super resilient. I think it's incredible the concept that you two brought. Like I said, it's very true to my heart. So I'm glad that this is how we're starting. And with that said, I guess my follow-up question would be, what is the most common mental health problem among men, Black men?
I'll let you go, Roy.
I would say, thank you. I'd say, as you kind of highlighted, 1 in 10 Black men do have depression. They're living with depression, and the number is probably higher because something which I thought was really interesting was that there's only been 19 studies from 1985 to 2010 looking at depression in Black men, despite Black men having such a high rate of depression.
Right.
And these studies, though few, they have seen that depression in Black men has a unique presentation. And like tiny bit of evidence has just shown that is where that racism comes to play, that like some of the depressive symptoms are like a manifestation of that racism. But away from depression and PTSD as well, in the UK, it's that Black men are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with a psychotic disorder, so schizophrenia. And the reasons why are really poorly defined, but from my knowledge, I would just say that lived experiences of racism, structural, individual, direct, indirect, put you in a permanent state of threat vigilance.
Right.
And that is a brain state that puts you at risk of a psychotic disorder. Not to mention, of course, misdiagnoses are a thing as well. So I'd say definitely depression, PTSD, and psychotic disorders is what we're seeing with Black men.
Yeah. How about you, Sean? What is it like in the States?
I apologize. I was trying to follow everything Roy just said, man. Real quick, so would you mind just kind of highlighting what you just said so I could, kind of.
Sure. What I was saying was,
sorry, man.
It's fine. It's that 1 in 10 Black men have depression. And depression in Black men seems to be a bit unique because of the racism that Black men face. And in terms of psychotic disorder, so that's schizophrenia is really what we're talking about.
I got you.
Black men are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with one. There is definitely a role of misdiagnosis and over-diagnosing, but it is also that the types of systematic issues Black men face are the types of problems that put you at risk of getting schizophrenia.
I got you. Makes sense. Well, yeah, I mean, to that, I'll just start from the beginning. When I was younger, again, dealing with this stuff you deal with, I had a great childhood too, man. But I grew up on the south side of Indy and in a place called Granville. Right. And we had water gun fights. We rode bikes around the neighborhood playing tag, man. It was a blast, and but the negative aspects of living in that environment do happen. But I think what was a really good therapeutic thing for me and a lot of other Black men is music, movies. Like, you take Ice Cube, making Friday or Snoop Dogg's tracks, or whatever. Go to North. I'm in the Midwest, so I got New York, I got West Coast, I got Dirty South, all mixed in here, along with alternative music. I listen to rock, all of that. So, but to get back to the point on this, it was therapeutic for me to see that other Black men in other areas that I've never even seen before go through the exact same thing I'm seeing every day, right? And what I mean is that I'm not alone, and that was like the first time that I ever felt like I'm not alone, because when you grow up in the hood, it's like the hood is the entire world, but there's another world out there, and to be able to at least see it on film and know that there's someone else out there that's feeling like you do. It was very powerful for me growing up. And as far as the mental health thing with Black men, I think we are the most resilient species in the world, man. Like I mean, you look at the past 400 years up until now. We're not jumping off skyscrapers. I've had months where I had a day where I had $11 to feed my family. Some people would have shot themselves, and I'm not saying it in a joking way, but that's what Black men here deal with every day. And I was on the opposite side of that for a long time. I thought as long as I grind and did everything right and everything I was supposed to do, I would never find myself in that situation. And I was wrong. But it opened my eyes to something better. And as much as I hate, the surgeries I had to go through for that, I'm thankful for that, because that other Sean, he would have had his own personal financial branch, and he'd have had a big janitorial company, but he wouldn't affected as many people as I've personally affected already, that come up to me and talk to me about, experiences and just not giving up, because like I said, I didn't start writing until I was 35 years old. That's grandpa, for a lot of people. So the thing I really want to stress is that we're here, man. We're all going through it, and just to keep trying to lift each other up, and that's the big message, man. If we can all come together, regardless of your race, we can come together and just lift each other up, we can get so much more accomplished. But again, that's why I write, right? Anything I write is going to have some type of moral compensation to it. So, yeah. And again, I don't mean to take up your time or anything.
No, it's really amazing. I think it's almost that you're saying that, from what Roy said, talking about depression being the most common one, you're kind of, addressing it inadvertently in a way that, you can afford to even express your feelings. You can afford to know what it is that you're feeling, but yet you still find, the light at the end of the tunnel, and finding, therapeutic forms, listening to music. Music is actually one of the most therapeutic things. I 100% agree with you. It's, I play music, I listen to music. Sometimes I always say that words cannot capture internal experiences enough. So I listen to music just because, you talk about your feel, or they'll feel it for you in a way. And rap, especially early rap, I think has a lot to do with lyricists. I just talking about their struggles, and you're talking about that because mental health doesn't really discriminate anyone. We're also susceptible to it, whether we're in the UK, whether we're here in Canada or in the States, and I think the shared experiences, the outcome is the same. You're going to feel something that's going to make you feel, insecure or self-conscious about yourself. And that in and of itself, finding therapy just because through, something that you think is, because we talked about affordability earlier, but, music is music. You can just open up, your laptop and play, and it may give you the exact same, therapy that you need, whether you were to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist to talk about it. So it's nice that, because you're resilient. I think Black men are the most resilient species that I've ever came across with, and I always found that interesting. Like I said, I have a lot of brothers and a lot of uncles, and I always found that interesting, how they express themselves or how they choose to express themselves. And I guess to kind of pull us up to the next question, why do you think is that Black men's mental health is more complex than any other person? Than statistics or clinical diagnoses indicate?
That is the fantastic question. I mean, one group of Black men that I think is quite interesting to look at to answer that question are LGBTQ plus Black men.
Mm-hmm.
That's something which is really interesting. Two things that stood out for me when I was doing some research was that LGBTQ Black men have a very unique brand, we can say, of internalized discrimination that seems to stem from like a very unique conversation between their masculine, ethnic, and masculine, ethnic, and cultural, let's say, identities. Oh, masculine, ethnic, and sexuality. There we go. That's what we're talking about. Their identities, how that communicates. It presents itself as a very unique form of internalized discrimination.
Right.
And also something to segue into that, sexual stereotypes are a very interesting thing that happens to Black men, where words like aggressive or kind of ruthless, or even in kind of like when we look at kind of the porn industry, that Black men are kind of described using these adjectives to describe them. And kind of like a white actor is taming them or surviving an experience with them. Right. All of that. And that with then LGBTQ black men, they face these stereotypes. Also, the stereotypes that are normally ascribed to white gay men. So being like or non-monogamous, all of that. And their own unique stereotypes too. Diseased, dirty, loud.
Right.
So what I mean by that, why I'm using the LGBT as an example, is just to show that one of the reasons why mental health is so complex for Black men, straight, gay, trans, whatever, is because Black men tend to occupy such an interesting intersection between identities that isolated are risks, putting you at risk. Being a man is hard, being Black is hard, being a Black man, doubly hard, and that it's that you experience both of these things and they communicate to create their own struggles too. So that's what I would maybe say.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's excellent. Being an LGBTQ plus man is a lot harder than all the other. I mean, they're all hard in their own way, and I think that the experiences of expression and forms of even. I think I heard about somewhere that the coming out story, how you're gonna, when you're Black, you're Black. I don't need to come out to anyone because, you see my color. But for LGBTQ plus community, it's you're gonna have various variations of coming out stories to people. That in itself creates a huge struggle, and I think it really is. I'm so glad you brought up that one aspect of a bigger complex of Black men and Black men mental health. So I think that's really, really great, and it shows why. Like I think we talked about earlier, the 1 in 10, but that's those that are suffering in silence, or those that are not going to come out, those that are not going to speak. I think that there's a large disproportionality even within the statistic itself, even with the diagnosis, and also mental health indicators. Let's talk about mental health indicators. I know they exist, but do they exist for Black communities the way they do for the white respondent? No, they don't. So
it's so just to finish with LGBT Black men, it's also what I found out recently is they can face disproportionately higher rates of police discrimination and incarceration, which is something which I wasn't aware of. More likely to have been affected by childhood sex abuse, higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and really specifically, that I thought was very interesting, is that it's a feeling of being a burden that is experienced by a lot of LGBTQ plus Black men.
Mhm.
That all of these complex experiences get internalized into this feeling, I'm a burden. And who's going to talk about their problems if they feel like a burden? You know? So that's
Yeah.
why these issues go really unrecognized. So that intersectionality, yeah.
And unreported as well. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. So it's really great that you brought that up. I think it's so crucial, especially in this day and age. And we are talking about increased challenges of Black men and their mental health. I guess the next question would be, because we're talking about the different catalysts, I think kind of follows up with that. What are these increased challenges today among Black men and what they face, and how is that impacting their mental health compared to, since I have to give a specific time of frame, I guess 5 years ago versus now? And a lot has happened the last 3 years, let alone 5 years. So what are your take on it?
Sean, do you want to go for it? Go for it.
No, Roy, I love hearing you talk, man. You got this I like your voice, dude. Go ahead.
It's the accent. It's the
Yeah,
British
there you go.
accent.
It's the accent, yeah. It gets you.
No, I think it's that's a really interesting one where the question, even me, the question, it's a very difficult one to answer because like I said at the start, there's only been 19 studies looking at depression in Black men over 25 years. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like that's a real era of just care, really. That in the past 5 years specifically, I think generally as a population that mental health has gotten worse. We have gotten better at diagnosing it, but it is true that more people are experiencing common mental health problems. But if I were to hazard a guess at this question, I would blame social media in some category. Because it's kind of my generation. Social media is just, it's a whole world that just is not controlled properly, is not censored, is not, yeah, we're finally doing trigger warnings or whatever, but there's an entire generation, my generation, who started social media at 11 or whatever. They're now 23, and that was 12 years of being exposed to negative comments from people you don't even know and their friends ganging up on you, all able to insult the really integral aspects of you as a Black man, you know. I'd say maybe in 5 years there'd be a role of social media that could play in that potentially.
Yeah, I mean, talking about social media, there's also all these services. I don't know if the many mental health apps that I keep seeing. I don't know whether that's a good thing or that's a bad, because on one aspect, I'm a millennial, so I've seen through the various stages of the booming of the social media era enough to be addicted to it just enough and like stay away from it just enough as well. So it's a balance for me. But I think this is Roy's version, is someone that's been exposed to social media, and I absolutely agree. It plays a crucial, just as much as it plays a positive role because it connects people in such a way, but it also disrupts someone's mental health. I mean, it also speaks to not just Black men. Talk about women, Black women, and the stereotypical aspect of how women are portrayed. Black women are portrayed in social media, and I've seen that the adverse effect of that. So, Sean, you're a little bit older than us. So, from your perspective, what do you think are these increased challenges that Black men face today compared to 5 years ago?
Well, one thing I did want to mention with the last bit you said about Black women, I did want to mention, man, like anytime that I have been down and out or, just struggling to make that next move, it has always been a Black woman that has pulled me out of it. And I recently I recently started calling every woman I meet, you're a queen to me, because again, it's a struggle. It's again, you got that mental health thing going on, and you may not have anybody to talk to, but there's two people that's always been there is God and my mama, and she's a praying mama, right? So that's always been a good go-to for me.
Mhm.
As far as, social media, things like that are concerned, I, I think that it's the same stuff that's been going on, except we got cameras now, right? And there's a little bit more accountability, and you can see it, things going in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, you take things like marijuana, for example. Um, a lot of states it's legal now, but you still got brothers and sisters here in Indiana that are getting locked up, right? And I could go on Hulu or anywhere else right now and see someone growing their own pot farm, and they're having such a good time, but we're still getting locked up over here over things like that, and it's mind baffling, when we think about the United States, it's a country, but each state governs yourself a little bit, right? So it's what's legal in one state up, you can get arrested for in this state, and um, those are things that can change, um, you know, uh, through getting in office and making differences that way. Um, Again, the shorts and things that I put out of that nature. Um, it's not always it's always going to reflect something that's going on or an issue that's going on that I feel strongly about. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
No, I think that's really is amazing, because you're both vastly different in how you express things, but the underlying message is the same. I think, Sean, you're really alluding to the unspoken truth about the day-to-day struggles that Black men face. We're talking about, even though you don't know what it is that you're trying to coin. First of all, no one even knew what mental health was the way it's termed. I work in mental health services as well, and 5 years ago, we used to call it the psych ward, and people used to think, oh, that's a crazy word. Now it's relabeled mental health because we're talking about, the health of your well-being, the non-physical aspect of it. So it is an evolving process, but with that comes, challenges. But are these increased challenges, or were they always there? And now we're just speaking about them more, and we're adding more indicators. Like Roy said, we're talking about diagnosing things better, but then we're also talking about indicators or the lack thereof for specific groups, because are these indicators catering to a certain race, or are they talking about race, variations? But we're talking about 19 studies. That's still in my head. It's since 1982.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Sean, what you were mentioning, it's the unfortunate truth how when we do talk about Black men, particularly in America, but worldwide in the UK, this thing about incarceration and police discrimination is such a big factor and such a reality. That something that I thought was really interesting is that Black men in the UK are more likely to be subject to police involvement when they're mentally unwell, which to me really speaks to our society to think that an individual is more likely to be treated like a criminal in society rather than a patient in need of care.
Mhm.
And that's what really interesting with Black men. I don't think people think Black men need care, need a hug. You know what I mean? Something as simple as that. They don't think that. Even a Black man is 3 to 13 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. So that's obviously where your mental health has gotten to a point where you need kind of your, let's say, liberties taken away from you, and you are forced into a inpatient care. That Black men are 13 times more likely for that to happen, and more likely to be treated as a criminal by the police than a patient in need of care. Whether that's increased, I don't know, but that is just a lived fact of Black men, is this idea that they don't need, I say a hug, like it's just like a hug, but like a hug. You know what I mean?
Hey man, listen. I have a 9-year-old daughter. I need a hug every day of her life. She tells me every day that I'm the best dad in the world, and that affirmation right there, goes beyond anything anybody else could possibly think of me. You know, I'm her world. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm a hugger. You know what I mean? You look at me. I'm 240, 6'1". You know, I'm not a small man, but yeah, I need that hug daily. If I don't get it, I'm upset, and she's upset. So it's not the older queens that's sustaining me; it's the younger ones. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that.
That really is sweet. I think 13 times. It's just these statistics are really throwing me off the loop of like you're being criminalized for having a mental health problem. I mean, no wonder Black men are not speaking up about their issues, and because mental health it can be visible and it could be invisible. You know, there's depression, for example. People could be really good at hiding it, but schizophrenia, it's episodic, right? So it's either you see it or you don't. So you're going to be criminalized if you, like you said, it's this. The stats are really, why is there leniency for non-Black people or non-people of color? When they see them, they're more likely to empathize and say, oh, they need help. But then when it's the Black man, oh, let's put that person in jail. I mean, why is there such a stigma?
Do you know, one thing, just last thing to add, you just reminded me of. So when I was finishing my master's, I had the privilege of spending a month on placement in like a hospital in London. And we were working at kind of step 4 mental health care. So that's a level just below kind of like a mental health facility. It's mental health wing in hospital. And I was working with a patient who had schizophrenia. And one question that you can have, that you kind of ask someone is, what are you experiencing? Do you experience visual hallucinations, audible, that kind of thing? And long story short, this Black guy with schizophrenia's hallucinations were always of being persecuted and chased by white people, which I thought was so interesting and fascinating. So I presented that to kind of the supervisor of our group. And that wasn't a piece of information that was known prior to my conversation with him. And that's something which is also an important thing to recognize with Black men in mental health, is the unique ways mental health is expressed or perceived in the case of hallucinations. That often, because mental health tends to be either white men or white women doing it, there's a whole struggle that is often overlooked, or they wouldn't think, for example, that someone who's experiencing persecutory hallucinations, that may be coming from a time in their life where they were persecuted for being Black.
Right. There's trauma there, yes.
There's trauma there. So that was something I just wanted to add, which is always very interesting to think about.
Right. It's the perception, I think. It's not the experience. It's how it's perceived by the person that is, diagnosing it. And also we talked about misdiagnosis. So that I think that plays a part in the statistics. So which follows up to my next question, because it's going to be more specific. And you talked about your clinical experience. So I just want to know, this is for you, Roy. How does neuroscience and the brain affect your mental health?
Oh gosh, we got another hour.
We can go all day.
I mean, where to even start with that? So something which is really, really interesting that we've really established, first of all, is looking at the biology of stress. So if we can kind of boil down all mental health problems to this kind of general feeling of being stressed, let's just put it like that. What they found is that stress is like a psychological experience from a biological mechanism that involves the nervous system, the immune system, and your hormonal system. So what they found is that, let's say that I perceive psychological stress. That will then start to impact my hormonal system. So my hormones will start releasing stress hormones.
Right.
And stress hormones affect your immune system. And then your immune system affects the functions of your brain. And then by that releases hormones, it becomes a whole axis. So one thing with mental health in terms of neuroscience is that those psychological experiences eventually leave like a fingerprint on your biology.
Right.
And biological experiences can leave a footprint on your mental experiences. That someone who has depression is more likely to suffer from coronary heart disease. That someone with depression this is really interesting. If they have a paper cut, their wound heals about 40% slower than someone who doesn't have depression at all.
Wow.
And why? Because healing of a wound relies on your immune system. And your immune system is being affected by the stress hormone that was released because you were stressed out. You see, back to that axis thing. So in terms of neuroscience and the brain, like I said, I could go on for ages, but it is your entire body talks to each other. And when you experience a mental health problem, it will affect your physical health. It will affect every part of your physical health.
Right.
When you have a physical health problem, it's only a matter of time before it will start to also affect your mental health. So that's kind of what I would say to answer that question.
No, that's brilliant. I think I always think like neuroscience it just deserves a topic of its own. I think brain health and neuroscience. You talk about the interconnectedness, and we talked, Sean, when you talked. Actually, you said something that really hit me. I think we asked earlier, what is the most common mental health problem among Black men? I think we forget stress. Stress itself mental health problem, and that stress is a trigger. You talked about a simple paper cut causing stress, and the immune system and attacking it, and how it's a very circular problem. And I think often stress is, even not just for Black men, I think for everybody, is the highly misdiagnosed, often overlooked problem, but it's actually the most crucial one everywhere, because we're stressing every 2 minutes of our lives, every seconds. And I'm stressed just thinking about stress. So it is just such a crucial mental health.
That's the thing. Stressed about being stressed.
Yeah.
There was another study, as we're talking about stress, was saying how us African American men, what do they believe is like the most dominant negative influence on health? Stress was what came up. And the factors that they said are the most stressful or lending themselves to stress was lack of income, racism, bad neighborhoods, and conflict in relationships. And unfortunately, those are four or five, that Black men are systematically placed into. And you don't have to be a Black man to know that these things are stressful anyway, let alone if you're systematically placed into them.
Right.
Stress is such an issue. Loneliness as well. Isolation is a big thing, particularly like in the UK, where we have a lot of like first generation, whether legal immigrant, illegal immigrant, naturalized citizen, where you're in a country for better opportunities, but your entire community is back in Ghana. It's isolation and stress is a massive thing when we talk about mental.
Yeah, and I think it's just when you said stress, when you're talking about brain science, I was just like, yeah, that's the most, and it's often rarely that doctors would ask about, were you stressed about something? Because sometimes it could just be as simple as understanding what it is that you're going through. It doesn't have to be a mental health struggle. It could be about, your hair is falling out and you're wondering why that is, and you immediately go to the blood work, and it could just be simply stress. And I don't want to say stop stressing, but if you stress less or identify the problem, then you can find a better treatment for it. So I think it's a really brilliant answer. I guess my next question is to Sean. Working in the entertainment industry, having done what you do, could be a tasking and often a very daunting job. And I know you've done it for 5 years, over 5 years. You're passionate about it, but I'm sure it comes with long hours and pressure to produce, and you have children, so you have your businesses. So I just wanted to know if there are any mental health services. I've always been curious, actually, within for screenwriters and filmmakers in your industry.
Yes, there is. I'm kind of glad you mentioned that. There is. Shout out to New Hollywood. That is a great community of like screenwriters, different people in the industry that, sometimes, like I said, we just come together and we just write in silence, just knowing, again, somebody's on the other end doing the same thing you are. We talk about things, help each other out. Just that community was really special. And I apologize. What was your other question?
Are there mental health services within the film industry?
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, that would be the one. But You know, like I said, I'm on LinkedIn myself, and you know, I talk to screenwriters all the time. Um, I recently just I wanted to see how good I was, and if I you know, some people get the fraud syndrome, all that stuff. So I wanted to get over it real quick. So I started working with screenwriters on LinkedIn, and I became their one stop writing room. You know what I mean? I would talk to them about developing the characters, making things more exciting and more appealing, you know, to directors, and in some cases, I changed their whole script up. But it was a cool experience because every single person was happy, and I mean, I'm going from elves and goblins to serial killers, you know, and everything in between, and just to know that that's their specialty, you know, and I was able to help them out is really cool. That's yeah. So I started doing that. I've done probably about 20 of them, but at the same time, from doing that, um, you know, they were able to learn things from me. Maybe they angles they hadn't thought of. You know, I was able to learn from them as well, just how direction goes as far as okay, you know, I want to lead you this way with your story, and what do you think about that? If, you know, they can say great, that looks good, then you know that's a win for me, and it helps me, it helps them, and you know, it's been a real good experience. So I'd say get in the community, like even if it's not in the film industry, if you're a janitor, get in a janitorial community with some like-minded people that are trying to do the same thing as you, same goals, and help each other out. You know what I mean? That's one thing that we don't do a lot of. You know, no matter who you are, you know, just helping each other out. You know, not expecting anything in return. And you know, I found that giving and not thinking about receiving in return has brought me further than anything else. You know what I mean? So again, that community, I'd say get in the community.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because he talked about the non-tangible experience. You know, it's not about to gain something back from it. I mean, of course, it's rewarding, but when you know, because you said there are services, but also creating that space for yourself within the community is also equally just as great. And it may not be, you know. I mean, how do I explain this better? I think it's a lot more rewarding for me to create that space and say, "Hey, there are screenwriters like me. Let's talk about whatever." It's a lot more rewarding than what people realize, and maybe I'll be less reluctant to access mental health services, but I'm more likely to talk about it in the community because there's a space for it. We actually have this Black Ottawa Connect group in Ottawa, and we share about, you know, businesses that are Black owned, or someone's asking me about, hey, where do I go to find a Black psychiatrist or a Black doctor? So we created this like information sharing space, and it has a lot of people that continuously do that. And I think there's a few in the UK as well that I've connected with on Instagram. And I think, you know, what do you do when there's no seat at the table for you? You don't just share it, you create your own, and it will have a bigger impact. And, you know, so it's incredible that you really highlighted that as well. So let's talk about services, because I think I asked you about mental health services. There's this interesting statistics where in America, only 26.4% of Black men between the ages of 18 to 44 who experience daily feelings of anxiety or depression were likely to have used the services, whereas the rest will not. I mean, 26.4 is still low margin for the American population, specifically for the Black American population. So what do you think are some of the factors as to why Black men are less likely to, and I have to reword this question because I was going to say to have access, but then I wanted to say, what are the reasons why they're less likely to gain access to mental health services? Because the access could be there, but you may not have the culpability. So why do you think that is?
I'd say the classic explanations, I think, like pride, toxic masculinity, cultural stigma, element of distrust as well. I think particularly, and I can't speak for kind of communities of the diaspora, but I can say kind of within African communities, there is maybe more of a distrust towards going to like a psychiatrist, you know what I mean? Or like that professional setting that turns off a lot of black men from accessing it versus, as you kind of mentioned there, if it was a bit more kind of an informal community space. Isolation, I think, is a really big factor as well of kind of that feeling of, let's say you are first generation and you've moved to a new country, you want it to go well. You don't want to be calling home for help. You want home to be calling you for help.
Right.
So you don't want to admit you need that help sometimes. And then I think systematically as well, it's in America at least, where health insurance is a thing. I think if we look at kind of rates of unemployment, but the really key thing sometimes I want to add when we say unemployment is the rates of black men who are looking for work but can't get it.
Right.
Because sometimes when you say unemployment, at least in the UK anyway, there's this assumption that it's people who are just sitting on the sofa wanting to like claim whatever and not do anything. But no, like these are black men who are looking for work, but they are being rejected. They can't make the money to now have to spend it on their own mental health. And that's the thing sometimes, as kind of Sean has mentioned with his lived experience, like success for black men often comes at the risk of burnout and burning out. That when you finally made it, you finally gotten enough money where you could spend that money on your mental health. You're a bit like, I spent so much time working to get here. I just want to spend it on just enjoying myself or celebrate other people. You know, so it's a loop, I'd say, for all of those things that really limit accessibility. In the UK, I know that like GPs tend to be very, so our general practitioner, that's kind of like what we do. Well, you know how the GP kind of works.
Yeah. It's the same here.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So we call up the GP, and for black men, GPs are less likely to actually be involved in the diagnostic journey. So for black men, the GP sees them and then they move on. Whereas for other people, the GPs actually stay involved and stay up to date. And in the UK, black men are less likely to be offered therapy, like CBT or family counselling. They're just more likely to kind of be told you don't need that care. Move on.
Yeah, it's almost like, why do you need that care? It's not even that you don't need it.
Yeah, the assumption that black men have thick skin and nothing can harm them, you know?
Right. I mean, I think when you said underemployment, you're absolutely right. It's the lack of gaining access to have employment for black men. And it's often assumed that they don't want to work, they're going to get social service, like what do you call it, like welfare services. And I think that in and of itself really creates that stigma. It further stigmatizes black men into that box, which is unfortunate, but it's true. Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's a huge negative stereotype associated with black men for sure. Most black men don't even get welfare. You know what I mean? No matter what their situation is. But yeah, I mean, as far as everything else goes with therapy, from personal experience, you know, I always went to God first, right? And it's always showed me a path, even when I'm not seeing it myself. As far as therapy, like me personally, I get up 4:00 in the morning to write, and I do that because one, I like it around that time. Two, I got 3 kids, and it's the only time the house is quiet, right? And then that span of time, you know what I mean? So they start getting up for school about 6:30, 7. So I got that 3 hours, man, where it's just me and it's just my world, you know. So I do everything there, man. Another huge thing that I think would help a lot of people is finding out what makes you happy. Like, what in life do you want to do that you can get up every day and it doesn't feel like work? Just putting a little time towards that, even if it's 4 a.m. in the morning for a few hours before you go to your 9 to 5 or whatever. But having that little bit of time to focus on your dreams and what you want your reality to eventually look like is precious. I mean, I've felt, again, I'm not a crier. I go to church. I haven't had the Holy Spirit, anything like that in church, but there's been mornings, man, where I'm writing and, I break down in tears, man, because I get this overwhelming feeling that, it's got me in tears, but it's also feels so good. I mean, like, and again, excuse my crude language, but it feels better than sex, right? It's like, and it's like if I feel funny. I feel like if everybody could find that joy in their life, you know what I mean? Other things wouldn't seem so tough. You could get through it a little more, but also having that support system. Like I said, I get my hug from my 9-year-old. I make my middle daughter hug me because she's getting to that age where, daddy's not cool anymore. And, and my son, my oldest, I get the hugs from him every day too. And I tell them I love them. They tell me, they love me, we make sure to have that support system for each other. And my wife goes into work, it's just the simple the simple stuff. Good morning, how you doing? Even though she's working from home too, it's just like I said, you can have a community even within your family. I think that's where it should start first, actually, and then you grow and expand from there. But yeah.
That is such an incredible answer. I think you highlighted something twice that I kind of it's stuck in the back of my head is even in my community, we often talk about spirituality being a source of mental therapy. And I often ask, my family, first of all, it's hard describing mental health to my family in my language because it's almost non-existent. So I kind of have to, it's something I struggle with in explaining it. But they always say, well, why do I have to go there? I just have God. And so spirituality plays a huge role. And I wish we could have a separate topic about it because it really is huge in the Black community. And I think it's all over the world. And also the community aspect you talked about. I think Black people we're culturally very communal. And even though I have like a different ethnic background, the moment I see someone Black, I'm more likely to just go up to them and I feel that sense of comfort to just be like, hey, like, you know.
You can even feel that essence, you know what I mean? You can feel the essence. It's like a kindred spirit, like,
Yeah.
No, I can hug you right through the camera right here, right now. I feel that. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's so that's something that I feel very strongly about is the role that church plays in the Black community as kind of like an institution for spiritual, social, and health benefits. And to bring it back again to kind of LGBTQ Black people, that's something that gets robbed from a lot of our LGBTQ community members is like I've been calling like homo negativity that you find in churches that make young queer Black men unable to leave their like family homes because they don't want to lose whatever religious connection they have.
Yeah.
But they don't feel like they can fully be themselves comfortable in this church, which used to be their safe space.
Right.
So there's been, as I'm kind of in this mental health role, something which I'm really happy about, we speak about spiritual care quite a lot. And it would be really great to like explore the role that church could play even more in like facilitating spiritually sensitive, culturally relevant, and like gender specific services for Black men who don't identify as cis or don't identify as straight,
Right.
so that we don't rob our own our people in our community from this safe space. Because
Right.
church, look, as we're talking about it, we say church, spirituality just in general in the Black community is so integral.
Mhm.
It's so integral to the community at large.
Yeah, I think it's the most therapeutic, and I love the way you coined it. It's a church as an institution, as for mental health. Or, and I see people getting up, getting dressed up to go, and these are folks that the day they've had or the week they've had that you would think, wow, it could cause like lifelong trauma, but you see them getting that sense of spirituality and coming back to it. And when you talked about LGBTQ, I remember there's church service, I don't want to say spiritual services, spiritual care. It's actually becoming more of a norm in hospitals, those that are even in mental health services. They do work in mental health services as well, and they request spiritual care because they want to be prayed for and they want to be cared for, and because they want to be closer to God when they feel that they're being literally in an institution to get mental health treatment. So yes, of course, there's also discrimination even within the institution, and like I said, LGBTQ, it's very sensitive to me because they have a lot of coming out stories. Like, how often are you going to come out? Like, how it must be
forever. It's forever for many of them.
It's ingrained in you, and I think you have to build that resilience to say, I will have it. But I see, the light at the end of the tunnel in the sense that you'll always have your own coming out story, and you'll always tell the version that you would like to tell it. So even if it could be exhausting, at least it's your story to tell, and you can tell it however you want to and whenever you want to. And I think and I really hope that spiritual services can cater, like you said, not just the cisgender, but to all people. It shouldn't discriminate, right? But I mean, that's why we're talking about this. And speaking about cultural norms, I guess I could just ask 2 more questions, and we can talk about this all day, like I said. And we talked about Black masculinity earlier and the role it plays in discussing struggles with mental health. What about cultural norms? Because we talked about the Black culture, the Black community, right? And how do cultural norms play a part in access to services, or even talking about issues surrounding mental health?
I'd say really big.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'd say. Like, particularly, the way that many. So if we could say like African psychiatry, if we can call it that, is quite externalist. So what I mean by that is something like depression is referred to as like the spirit of depression, or the spirit of anxiety, or the spirit of stress. And whether the individual means a literal spirit or not isn't important. But the problem with Western therapists and Western psychiatrists is they take that so extremely literally, but from the perspective of this person is seeing ghosts, and ship them straight into the psychotic bracket.
How true that is sorry.
Yeah, it's not funneling them where actually it's like, no, our good auntie here has depression. She's referred to as the spirit of depression. You didn't need to get bogged down in that. So it's culturally sensitive in recognizing the way different cultures, particularly I use the example of African communities, will describe mental health. We're talking about the same thing at the end of the day. We're talking about stress, we're talking about depression. You don't need to get so fixated on fixing that person from being externalist, and fitting your cultural norm.
Right. That I think that's really the epidemic problem, is you're trying to box me in to fix me without diagnosing it properly to begin with. And I think we talked about misdiagnosis, unreported cases, and when you talk about the spiritual auntie, of course it's and I see it when there's, like, for example, the role language plays, and language is part of a culture, part of many cultures, especially in African communities, and even trying to translate something to say, I'm seeing spirits, as opposed to, I'm feeling, it's just, there's that deleniency of, I think you almost lose the actual truth within the translation of it. So and that becomes easily misdiagnosed by the person who's trying to, fix you. And I don't even like the word fixing, because they often call it fixing, and it's no,
Yeah.
treat the problem, but find what's causing, what the root of the problem. That goes into understanding the person, where they come from, who they are, because you're going to know a lot more about them. But like you said, you're putting it into this Western conceptualization of mental health, which is not indicative, not remotely close to indicative of what that person is actually feeling. And it's often not just for African communities. I think it's for all, migrant communities, I'm going to say it, people that descended, that left their home, added stress, having to access these services, not understanding them, being mislabeled. And it's a circular problem. And it really is, it's an unfortunate circumstance, but it happens everywhere. It's happening in the UK. It's also happening here. It's definitely happening in Canada. I mean, in the US as well. So talking about increased challenges, the emphasis on today, I think today, especially the last 3 years, I find that, like we talked about social media and mental health apps and mental health services. How has the pandemic played a role in addressing mental health challenges? And has it been beneficial to Black men's health, or has it been detrimental?
You want me to go? Okay. Yeah. Again, I can't talk for all Black men, but the pandemic, kind of being in that isolation situation, again, it allowed my brain to expand and create universes, and it may be different for someone else. Me personally, before this, I wasn't able to, I didn't drive my kids to school. They all took the bus. This whole year, I've been trucking them from start in the morning to the end, after school, the games, and all three of them are athletes. So just being able to even like turn on the radio in the morning, and, one of my favorite shows is The Breakfast Club. You hear Charlemagne talking about mental health, and, I think it's shined a bigger light on it, and you have more men talking about it, and women talking about it, and how important it is. And, it's starting, like even the conversation we're having now, starting to come more to the forefront. I want to thank you guys for speaking on that as well. But yeah, man, I think it's coming. It's definitely moving in the right direction. And yeah, like I said, I can turn on the radio and hear about it now. I can pop on the TV and hear about it. I try not to watch a lot of news, so it doesn't influence me too much. Yeah. It's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like
How about
that.
you? Yeah.
I think yeah, like Sean has put it, it's good to be hopeful. You know what I mean? And to really look at hopeful. I think one thing that I definitely saw over the pandemic was like a real, because obviously what happened during the pandemic is George Floyd was so brutally murdered, which erupted in protests like I have never thought I'd see in my lifetime, of people really recognizing kind of Black struggles, but also revealed so many of the like hidden stereotypes and racisms that people have had against Black men. And something which, it's away from George Floyd, but I remember is two things to do with COVID-19 specifically. Was around when, before the vaccines were released, I can't remember who their names were, but there were two French scientists who wanted to test the vaccines in Africa.
I remember that news, yeah.
Which my mum and I, we were outraged, but not surprised. Not surprised. I think there was, in America, I don't know when it was, but there was the whole thing with syphilis, where Black men were kind of given syphilis. Crazy. But the other thing as well that was really made apparent during COVID-19, how fascinated the world became by how Africans and any Black people within kind of England or America were evading the pandemic. So let's say Africa specifically, because so many African countries didn't have particularly high rates of COVID-19.
Right.
And every answer, every kind of, I'll give you the example. You know what I mean by this is I had lots of discussion with people saying it's to do with like in the West, more Black people were getting COVID-19, but in Africa, not that many were. So for the ones in the West, it was saying that, oh, Black people, because of melanin, have vitamin D deficiencies, and that results in like a less powerful immune system, putting you more at risk, of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I said to my friend, I was like, the only thing about that argument that annoys me is how anything kind of that happens to Black people, good or bad, is always explained using like biological racism. It's somehow to say that, like, instead of just going for the very obvious explanation, which is that Black people in the UK tend to live in neighborhoods that have poorer access to healthcare, or they're living in estates where there are more people going through the same door. You know, just these, like, you don't need to be a researcher just to see that. They go straight in for the biological racism where Black people are built differently or built more inferior, that puts them more at risk just because of the way they are.
Right.
When a report came out in over kind of summer from Public Health England that no, racism has been a factor for why Black people have got COVID more. And the same with Africa. I was saying to my friends, I think the reason why Africa as a whole has dealt with the pandemic well is because African people do know how to organize themselves. They do know how to, like, they can do things well. They're human beings. You know what I mean? It's not this kind of like, oh, like, how can they do it? How can we not? Maybe it's time to recognize. Maybe you can just say they did it better than you did. You know,
it's just they don't want to acknowledge it, and it's so true. Especially when you talked about the two French scientists. I remember I got raged for 5 minutes, and I was like, "Wait, they did that with TB, the sugar testing. Suppose it's the same thing." And then I thought of like all those historical, unreported experiments on African people, and how a lot of modern science is actually thanks to African experimentalism. It's.
Yeah.
No one is admitting it, but it's the truth, So, like you said, I can't afford to be angry about everything that happened, because it's just at the end of the day, I got to protect my mental health and say, you know what, it happens. It's unfortunate, and I see it as being, especially the pandemic, it really highlighted open racism, and I think it exposed pretty much everybody. And like you talked about biological racism, because it exists, and how the alpha male, the alpha Black male, is built in such a way that he shouldn't feel things. The African woman, she shouldn't feel things either. What has she got to complain about, And yet, this is really unrelated, but I also see how this white interest among Black culture. I'm not talking about just music, even the to want to look like a Black person. You want to experiment on African people. You wonder, like the vitamin D deficiency, it's so common too. But yet you still want to mimic our culture. You still want to mimic where we come from, how you're fascinated by it. It's always going to be a fascination to you. And I think that biological racism is turning into biological imprinting of, our biological nature, to say that, wow, they are fascinating. Wow, they do have this. Well, they do have this. And it's actually a lot more damaging for me. I used to see it as, well, it's damaging my culture. And I say, no, it's damaging the person that's imitating my culture, appropriating my culture. And then I think the pandemic brought that up. Again, it's not related, but it's kind of related in a way, because I see the other side of the fascination doesn't really stem from the expectations that we're not supposed to feel, or like you said about the vitamin D, it has to be vitamin D. I'm living in the coldest part of the world, and I'm surviving okay with vitamin D drops. I mean, I've had COVID. And I didn't have adverse effects, and you're right, that annoys me a little bit, just because. Let's talk about Western medicine, Western science for a little bit. We have caught up. You guys have heard intermittent fasting. Where I come from, we fast a lot, because I come from a predominantly religious country, and we fast all the time. So when they named it intermittent fasting and they're explaining it, and I go, yeah, we fast like that, but for spiritual reasons. and then they're like, it's really good for your body. It like restart. I'm like, don't tell me something I already know. You're just catching up right now. So
oh my gosh, for me, it's whenever people tell me about like coconut oil is so good for your hair. You should put it in your hair. You should start using leave-ins. And I'm like, I've been doing that since I was born. Like,
I was born with coconut oil.
yes, you know what I mean? Where it is just that thing of like, but then when you say that, the person then doesn't walk away like, oh, like maybe I should get to know kind of like African culture and I could learn something.
Right.
It's kind of like, no. It's like, no, they kind of almost think that you were lying. They're like, oh no, you were an exceptional case. Everyone else ain't.
Yeah. It's it's astonishing. The coconut, of course. I felt like everything I do, my day to day has coconut oil in it in one variation or another. It's just yeah, which is also therapeutic. I mean, it has a lot of benefit. We already know. I don't need to explain that to you guys. But I think, unfortunately, we can go on for hours about this. But I guess my last question to both of you would be, ask Black men, what is a takeaway message? What are some helpful tips for the Black man seeking mental health services? Or what can you tell the Black man? How could we encourage our Black men to say it's okay to not be okay? It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel, to validate your feelings. What would be the takeaway message before we experience this? And we'll end it at that question.
Self-care really comes to my mind. There's something we've been talking a lot about in my job. They're like, obviously you're helping people with mental health problems, but you need to help yourself too. Mm-hmm. So just kind of open just that word self-care that comes in many ways, physical, spiritual, mental, psychological, social, to always 3 times a day, twice a day, once a week, regularly enough, check in with yourself first. Really be honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. Are you burning out? Are you doing the most? Are you doing a bit too much? Mm-hmm. You're one person. You don't have to bear the responsibility of every African person. What I mean by that is I feel like as Black men, we often feel, because it's kind of how it's our reality, is like we are all like ambassadors. We're all representing each other. So we carry each other's burdens, which is so lovely, but we need to remember that we also have our own burden, right? Individual, and we need to take care of ourselves to take care of others.
Yeah. That's a very good advice. And put your individual self first before you think about community. Yeah, I think that's a really amazing takeaway message. Sean?
I mean, I'd start out with that self-care thing. I'm not as elegant at it as Roy just was.
It's not gonna sound beautiful.
You're elegant. What are you talking about, Sean? You're elegant.
Yeah, man. But like I said, I chalk out that 4 a.m. time for myself. Just, like I said, check in with yourself. If you're not feeling it, you can't be expected to help anybody else feel it. Community, definitely reach out to people that have the same mindset as you. Even if it's, if I'm a screenwriter and you're a film director or what have you, we just have that community, Mm-hmm. Like I use the example of janitorial. There's a lot of janitorial companies out there. There's a lot of small janitorial owners, if they got together, that'd be something. That'd be cool. But that's just one aspect, man. It's whatever brings you joy, whatever gives you that light, that essence to keep moving and keep pushing. Strive for that, mm-hmm. first and foremost. And then, after, when you're happy, you can project that feeling out to other people and, be that for them, with which, you went through it by yourself, but now you can say, hey, I've been there. It's going to get better. What can I do to help? Right. And if we can do that a little more for each other, that will go a long way.
Yeah. I think those are two of the most, you guys talked about the common denominator is self-care, and the Black man never had the privilege to put himself first. And especially when you talked about your experiences, Sean, you never said I. You talked about your community, your children, and the works that you do. And I think to put I first is really crucial, and that goes through self-care. And I really hope for all, this is also applicable to everyone. It's not just it's a certain community. Self-care is so crucial and it's so important. It's something we can't afford, but it's something we could definitely create. We're creators. We're always going to be sharing space somewhere. And I think it's that resilience also comes with a high level of intelligence. If you've survived for this long, then you must have been doing something right, both of you. So this is such an enriching and incredible discussion that deserves a really huge space. And I thank you both so much. And hopefully we'll see you both in future shows. Thanks so much for giving us the space to share your experiences, also to bring up about your experiences in for Black men and mental health. And we do need to take care of our Black men, our Black brothers and fathers and uncles and everybody that's involved. So this has also been a learning experience for me. And like I said, I come from a lot of male-dominated families, so this is very applicable. And I thank you both so much. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Elsa. Thanks for having us.
Right.
Thank you, Elsa. It's good speaking with you too, Roy.
Good speaking to you too.
Absolutely. We're going to have to get off, man, and keep in communication.
100%.
I really enjoyed speaking with you guys. For sure.
Oh, speaking of which, you just reminded me, where can people find you if they need to reach out? What are your social media or any other forms of...
So, yeah, again, I'm old school. I just started with the social media thing. I'm primarily on LinkedIn. It's under my name, Sean Landrum. You can find me, ask questions, whatever you need to. I'm on Facebook as well, Sean Landrum. I'm on Instagram as IB Freshville. That's I, then a B, then a Freshville.
Love the name.
That's more of my my music side. Like I said, I've composed some good tunes, so I'm gonna keep that thing going too.
Awesome. How about you, Roy?
So for me, I guess keep it professional. You've got my email. It's as I was saying that, I think I've actually forgotten what my email is. Okay, what's about email? LinkedIn, you just type my name in, and then Instagram RKC_1999_.
Perfect. Really cool Instagram names, by the way. Yeah.
No, I tell you what, it's because I made a new email address recently for work.
Oh, I see.
And
I'll never remember those the first month. It's just...
Where did I put that dot? Where's the full stop there?
Yeah, it's somewhere. Well, thank you both so much. And I hope you have an incredible evening in the UK and an incredible day in Indiana, Sean. And I'll speak to you both of you soon. And bye for now.
See you later.